Achewillow. Chapter 10. A Marred Surface. I lean close to the counter, lowering myself to eye level. The surface is a perfect shine. It reflects the coffee grinder and shelves behind me with perfect clarity. The slight waves in the varnish give it the appearance of a lake, except instead of a clear blue sky and clouds, it's the Achewillow Cafe's ceiling and the collection of spoons on the wall that are mirrored on its surface. Like a lake, the image isn't perfect. Much like the skin over a body of water, the varnish is marred here and there by defects that break the image. There are the inevitable claw marks left by indiscreet raccoons overstepping their bounds as they search the cafe for leftovers when I'm not looking. Those who know where to look will see scratches left by a fork. Damage I once considered getting buffed out and refinished, but sentimentally have allowed to remain. I rub my thumb over the newest addition to the mosaic of characterful notches and scratches on my beautiful counter, and, for the first time, I'm irritated by the damage. He just grabbed a knife and ran it through his own hand, you say? Olivia watches me with the same attention I give my counter. She, too, is inspecting, looking at scratches and dents, assessing the damage. I know, because I've seen that look in her eyes before. Yep, I answer, pulling myself upright. Glad I didn't give him a steak knife. She sips her coffee and reaches out to touch the spot where Thomas's butter knife drove into my counter. Any idea what got into him? Olivia's fingers always have a few rings on them. Elaborate rings that are either costume jewelry or very expensive indeed. At first glance, they look a little over the top. Big rocks set in big, ornate bands. The stuff you'd expect that aunt you only see around the holidays to wear. These rings belong on hands that pinch the cheeks of children. Looking at those fingers and those rings rub the surface of my fancy counter, I wonder which they are. Exaggerated fakes or lovingly guarded heirlooms. For the first time, I notice one of them looks like it's in the shape of a fruit. Damned if I know, I explain. Maybe what he saw at Julia Remington's place pushed him over the edge. And what did he see at Julia's place? I give Olivia a tight smile that says, "You know damn well what he saw, lady." And where is he now? Michael Valencia took him to the hospital. Last I saw, he was still screaming that the whole town was trying to get him. Or was it maybe something he ate? I squint at her, and all Olivia can do is look at me over the rim of her mug as she takes another sip. Of course the idea crossed my mind, but I was also quick to dismiss it. My ingredients are top of the line, locally sourced, and always fresh. No one is getting food poisoning from the Achewillow, not on my watch. If so, it would have been from the continental breakfast at the Border Inn, because it's certainly not from here. Olivia doesn't argue my point. Some of the ingredients I use, all of the apples, in fact, are from her orchards. She's been with me long enough, and with Doris before, that she knows where everything I use comes from. Even the products from out of town are brought in by Gulliver, whom she knows well. Instead, she runs her finger over the dent again, rubbing them together in the aftermath. She then wipes them on a white napkin, leaving minuscule red streaks behind. Spiced Pfeffernussen and orange juice. The way Olivia says it, it sounds a bit like an accusation, but I've considered that possibility too. Both things that other customers have ingested with no adverse effects. She says, pushing her now empty mug away. Mind if I try one then? I pause. While I'm confident that my baking was absolutely fine, and I trust the orange juice as much as I trust any sealed product purchased from a supplier, I still pause. The image of Olivia stabbing herself paints itself in vivid colors on the canvas of my mind. Though I can't imagine her sharp mind succumbing so easily to any pathogen in the cookies or juice, It only serves to make the possibility all that more terrifying. I stare at her napkin next to her mug. The red marks scream at me. They accuse me of being careless, the same way I feel Olivia is. "Sure," I say with little confidence. "Do you want more coffee?" "Mm-hmm." I warm up her cup before putting the last Pfeffernussen on a plate. I'd emptied the display after the incident with Thomas earlier this morning. I had to clean and disinfect the counter thoroughly before putting everything back together and allowing customers back in. But I didn't put the remaining Pfeffernussen back. And looking at Olivia's napkin, I didn't do that good a job of cleaning. I take the offending piece of paper away. Olivia watches as I go to the register and grab the spray bottle and paper towels under the counter. Quickly, but more thoroughly this time, I spray and clean the counter in front of her. "Here you go." The plate with the single cookie slides a few inches across the counter, ending its journey over the notch left by Thomas. A final effort to paint over my negligence. Suspicious dark eyes look up at me as fingers laden with jewelry pick up the Pfeffernussen. I force myself to look around the cafe. I spy my other customers. Many didn't come back after the Thomas Sinclair incident, and this is the pre-lunch group, which means there are fewer than a half dozen of them. Each, however, is focused on their own business, reading or writing or messing around on their phones. If Olivia causes a scene... But she won't, however, because my cookies are fine. Olivia, always up for a little drama, holds the cookie in front of her face for a long moment before waving it under her nose, appreciating the smell. Her eyebrows shoot up and she pulls back a few inches. "Oh my," she says. "You did not pull back on the pepper, did you? Or the cinnamon? I wanted something with a bit of bite." "You did, didn't you?" She looks at me, expecting a reaction, but I give her nothing. Pepper and cinnamon don't cause acute paranoia or inspire self-harm. Olivia closes her eyes and brings the cookie to her mouth. I hold my breath as she puts a nibble's worth between her teeth and bites down. There's a satisfying crunch as the Pfeffernussen crumbles in her mouth. Her jaw works slowly, reminding me how Gulliver savors pastries and cakes when given the luxury. Just like him, she takes her time, identifying, sorting, judging every aspect of flavor and texture. With a nod of satisfaction, she takes another, bigger bite, halving what remains of the cookie. "You know, I was skeptical of the added spices, and I have to admit, it gives more of a kick than I expected, but it works." The compliment plays on my ego, but not quite enough that I don't remain wary of any adverse reaction. "It's like mulled wine," she continues. "On paper, who would want spices and sugar in their wine, but once you've had some, who wouldn't?" I'm glad that Olivia has moved on from the veiled accusations and has shifted focus to how delicious my Pfeffernussen are. It's tempting to move the conversation forward to my ideas for breakfast cookies based on the German treats. I'm really starting to warm up to the candied bacon option. Our roles have flipped, however. Maybe it's fueled by my worry that what happened to Thomas might happen to one of my best friends, my Achewillow mom. But now I'm thinking a lot harder about what, in my Pfeffernussen, could have provoked the paranoia in Thomas. I keep circling back to how he, out of 8 customers who ate the cookies, is the only one who had any reaction apart from complimenting the taste. And I don't know Thomas Sinclair. Maybe he has some underlying condition that went unmedicated. Maybe his family has a history of paranoia. The list of possible reasons for his perfectly unreasonable reaction is practically endless. He certainly has displayed a plethora of odd behaviors and quirky habits. Then again, I'm not so much a believer in coincidences as I might have once been. I look around the Achewillow Cafe again, half listening to Olivia talking about what spices she might want to see added or removed from my next batch of Pfeffernussen, and how maybe some apple Pfeffernussen might taste nice, especially in the fall. I make sure, as a precaution, that I haven't left any knives, butter or otherwise, on the counter, but my attention keeps drifting. It's on the counter again, on its almost perfect mirror surface. I look at myself in the varnish. I look at my frown and my worry. But I also see my anger, the burning hate I had for Thomas Sinclair while I made the Pfeffernussen. I see above me the row of spoons, each owned by a previous DuFour witch. There's the one I hung in honor of Doris that Agnes broke and repaired. Next to it, I see the thick, hand-carved spoon of Philomene DuFour. I don't know much about Philomene. She's been described as reckless at best, crazy at worst. I've been told that she's responsible for the immortal raccoons that live in the dumpsters out back. Philomene had a unique relationship with the magic of Achewillow, maybe even in a way that was not in line with the ethos of Doris and the other DuFour witches. But her spoon is up there, with that of the others. I think back to the recipe I used to make the Pfeffernussen, the angry scrawls and furious sigils in the margin. I always assumed the dog-eared pages were Philomene's, and while I didn't use any of the intentional magic of her writings, whatever they're for, I'd be lying if I pretended not to have had strong emotions while preparing the cookies. So maybe they only worked on Thomas Sinclair because the magic itself was only meant for him. The same way orange honey poppy seed cakes summon forth Gary Remington and not every ghost in Achewillow. And maybe, just maybe, now that I know it's possible that Thomas's madness was a result and the consequence of his own neglect, I don't feel that bad about it, even if I was the conduit for those consequences. I'd rather you keep trying to figure out biscotti, Olivia cuts back in, if it's all the same to you. Pardon? The comment jolts me. It takes a second to realign my thoughts and understand the context behind what she's saying. Instead of making random German anger cookies, she says, you should be mastering biscotti. It's been almost 2 years now, and frankly, I'm starting to wonder if I even remember what they're supposed to taste like. I thought your complaint was with the texture. The flavor, the texture, the crispness, the crunch. There isn't a feature of my biscotti that Olivia Figg hasn't complained about. Pistachio, chocolate, almond, and plain, she's turned down every single one of my attempts at making the damn things. The kicker is, there's nothing wrong with my biscotti. I've had biscotti made by an Italian chef. I know what they're supposed to taste like, smell like, and feel like in the mouth. At this point, I've had so much practice with the damn things that I'd put my twice-baked biscuits up against the best ones in Tuscany without fear of humiliation. The problem, at this point, is clearly with Olivia. With some effort, I'd be willing to accept that perhaps Doris did something very subtle and very special to her biscotti, something I've yet to replicate and will probably never understand. Otherwise, the issue certainly lies with Olivia. The texture is the canvas on which flavor is painted, she says. Now you're just quoting some nonsense from Doris. Or the Learning Channel, she counters, sipping from her mug. The point stands, dear. Once you put the food in your mouth, they're all the same, aren't they? They certainly are not. And I'm about to let her have it on that account when I notice the twist to her lips. She's trying to hide it behind her mug, as she tends to do when she wants to veil her expression, but I see it. I'm being mocked. Keep it up, woman, and I'll be serving you store-bought biscuits. She chuckles, popping the last bit of Pfeffernussen in her mouth. So, she says after swallowing, what are you going to do? Olivia stirs cream and sugar into her coffee. The question teases the introspection out of me. At a glance, I'm not even sure what she's talking about, but the illusion of this being just another normal morning at the Achewillow Cafe is shattered. What about? Thomas, Julia, Fred and Petunia? Where do I even start? She says, apparently unsure what to answer. Julia will be fine. Give her some time. The rest? That's more complicated. I was hoping to ask you if you knew anything else about the Donselites that might help, but I suppose you'd have told me if there was, right? Olivia nods slowly with a motherly smile. She looks at the bottom of her mug like she's reading a script written in the last few sips of coffee there. Trust me, lights have nothing to do with anything. So you keep telling me. I look at my dining room, at the layout of tables, seeking answers in their pattern and arrangement. I want to believe the lights are harmless, but I've run out of ideas as to what could be happening. Should I mention the proximity of the Hellgate to Olivia? No, she wouldn't know what to do about that either. At least, not as well as others might. Mayor Lagacé will see you now. The aide looks about twice my age, and everything about his demeanor reminds me of that difference between us. He's dressed in a suit and has the straight back of an aspiring politician himself. I feel like someone should tell him how Achewillow might not be the launch pad for his ambitions that he thinks it is, but considering the level of condescension he showers on me, I'll let inevitable failure be the bearer of bad news. Getting this short appointment with the mayor felt like begging for an audience with a queen. The decor leading to her office also reflects the antiquated comparison. City Hall in Achewillow is located in what might well be the oldest building in town. Even the church looks more modern. The corridor the aide takes me down is just as I imagined it to be, just as it's been described to me. The walls are old, worn brick and mortar, decorated by the occasional photo or painting from the history of Achewillow, and regularly spaced lighting fixtures. The images show many of the mayor's predecessors performing all manner of official functions. There are ribbon cuttings, including one of Mayor Byrne at the arena, presumably reopening after the fire that burned it to the ground. There's even an old sepia-toned photo of the Achewillow Cafe. No opening ceremony there or anything else official. Just a photograph of how the coffee shop used to look long before I took over. The floor is covered in porcelain tiles, gray in color, except for 2 lines of aged red and faded blue. At the very end of the corridor, there's a fancy end table adorned with a fancy candelabra and 2 small soapstone sculptures, one of a bear and the other of a fox. Above the table, resting on hooks screwed into the wall, there's a sword. Compared to the carefully carved table legs and the stylized animal figures, or even the elaborate silver candle holder, it doesn't look very impressive. In fact, there's a utilitarian simplicity to the blade. The hilt lacks decorations beyond a simple leaf pattern. The handle is covered with worn leather, stained with evidence of use. Even the edge bears the notches and scratches that testify to a busy past. Ms. DuFour. The voice of Mayor Lagacé calls out from her office, inviting me to push open the door and come in. It's not what I expected. I thought the elected official in charge of the Canadian side of the town of Achewillow would have a rather lavish work environment. Especially considering the age of the building, I'd built this image in my mind of a large office with tall ceilings, wooden rafters, stone walls, and large windows. Instead, the office is little more than a cubicle. There's barely enough room for a desk and a file cabinet. It's also deceptively utilitarian. The lack of wall space leaves nowhere to hang decorations, and the low ceiling houses a fluorescent light that bathes the small room in harsh light. A simple computer and pages upon pages of documents litter the surface of the desk, a piece of furniture that I would almost wager was purchased from IKEA. Have a seat. I accept the offer and sit across from the mayor. It's about the Donselites, I say, cutting to the chase. My words are met with a frown and a sigh. The mayor stands up in a put-upon manner and takes 2 steps around me to close the door. She then takes a seat again and leans back, drawing her fingers together in a steeple before nudging her chin in my direction. Go on. I know you and Mayor Byrne take care of, demons in the woods, and the lights have taken 2 teenagers from town. The police won't be able to help, and I'm running out of options. The lights, they happen close to this wooden structure, and I trail off, Lagasse's expression shows no sign of understanding or sympathy for my situation. There's no complicity in two people fighting the same evils. My words aren't building the bridge needed for this delicate exchange. In fact, they only seem to dig the chasm between us deeper. And you think that this structure is linked to the lights and that demons took your friends, she concludes for me. You did well to come to me with this. I sigh in relief. Judging from her strict demeanor, I was ready to assume that the mayor was going to chew me out for wasting her time. It's a weight off my shoulders to know that at least because, she interrupts my train of thought, sinking my relief. If you'd gone to my counterpart across the hall, she'd have chewed your head off, perhaps even literally. I don't understand. It's an honest complaint. The mayors have, in general, been gracious and polite with me ever since I took ownership of the Achewillow. Perhaps they haven't showered me with the warmest welcome, but they've been good enough to patronize my establishment and have been generous tippers. However, when things of a supernatural nature are brought up, there's a cold hostility that I can't figure out. Miss DuFour. She leans in, making an obvious effort to soften her features. I like you. We like you. You've clearly come across some information about Mayor Burns and my responsibility for the town. We're both very grateful that you keep quiet about what you know. However, we would also like to thank you not to assume that you have all the facts, or, for that matter, that we're on the same side. The veiled, almost quiet hostility in that last statement chills me. These two women fight demons. Fight. They do not placate with pastries or negotiate relationships with them. Mayor Byrne lost an eye and 2 fingers in her battle with the denizens of the Inferno. I think back to about a year ago, when 2 members of the so-called Inquisition reduced the Achewillow Cafe to absolute rubble while trying to take down a single demon. Not on the same side holds implications that I might end up, or already be, in the crosshairs of these 2 efficient demon slayers. I struggle to gather my wits. I don't presume anything. The only thing I believe, the only thing I know, is that both you and Mayor Byrne are fully dedicated to the safety and security of the people of Achewillow. And I know I'm just some poor replacement for my great-grandaunt, but I assure you I feel the same. And right now, 2 of your constituents are missing, and I'm trying to find them. The mayor makes a point of ignoring me for a moment. She looks at her computer monitor and picks up some papers that she piles together. She taps the sides of the newly formed stack to even it out before putting everything down at the corner of her desk. I appreciate the vote of confidence in our abilities, Miss DuFour, but you misunderstand. We're bureaucrats first and foremost, administrators. We have the daunting task to balance the economic and legislative mechanisms of a single municipality spread over 2 nations. In a day's work, we discuss budgets and the split in civic responsibilities. This morning, we argued about how best to distribute work for clearing the snow from the streets. We also have to appoint someone new for the permits office. She sighs, picking up a few pens that she gently stacks over her pile of documents. We, she continues, do not make a point of chasing down random mysteries or make any attempt at investigating every little enigma that pops up. There simply aren't enough hours in the day, and while we may have certain ceremonial obligations, they are not our core responsibilities. I can see the dead end this road of inquiry is heading towards. I've driven here before on many occasions, especially when trying to get answers from Lagasse and Byrne. Today, I refuse to turn back. I will not leave empty-handed from this encounter as I have many others in the past. These are my friends. They vanished into thin air, and if you have any information, any possible thread I could follow that might help find them, it's your duty to tell me. I expect to see Mayor Lagasse offended by my outburst, perhaps frustrated at my presumption and demands. Instead, there's a brief flash of regret that clouds her eyes. She adjusts the arrangements of pens in front of her before pushing back from the desk and leaning back in her chair. Our duty, she explains patiently, is as I've described. budgets, laws, appointments. The demon hunting, the witch hunting, is an added responsibility we'd both rather avoid. I'm not sure the amount of menace I'm meant to read in her tone and words. Would the two of them really turn against the DuFour witches, against me, or is Lagacé referring to something else? But I promised myself I would get something out of this meeting. Please, I insist, struggling to keep my tone soft. Anything. At long last, after an eternal minute of Mayor Lagacé digging into my soul through the window of my pupils, she seems to give up. Whatever judgment was being passed upon me during this time, I must have been found worthy, if only a little. Fine, she says, relenting. There is one thing I know about the dance lights, though I doubt you'll find it of any use. She was right. The secret Mayor Lagacé shared about the lights is of little use. It's an academic detail, a curiosity. That being said, I'll take my victory, small as it is, and enjoy it. I told myself I would not leave City Hall empty-handed, and, as promised, I did not. I wonder if this is something Olivia knew, or maybe Henry Fig. If so, why would they not have shared? The chimes to the Achewillow welcome me back, along with an appropriately professional wave from Stefan. Business seems to be going well. The dining room is filled with customers, and my sole employee looks adequately overwhelmed. It's nice to see his salary being earned. I see several people of Stefan's age, an age I have to actively remind myself that I share. Part of me, the motherly Doris-like part, wishes Stefan had more time to engage with his contemporaries. I know him well enough to understand that, even if he did have a few minutes between serving lattes and warming sandwiches, he'd use them to clean the counter or bus the tables. It's enough to make me wonder about his social standing. Is he a pariah, or does he choose to keep distance between himself and the rest of his peers? Maybe it isn't for lack of wanting, but a dearth of opportunities. Hey, Miriam, a familiar voice calls from the counter. Didn't think I'd see you here. The voice is that of Annabelle. Unlike Petunia, she looks no different during the day than she does at night. While she's not standing behind a wall of red plastic cups and liquor bottles, her self-assured and comfortable demeanor remains very much the same. I don't know if you've been told, I answer with a smile, but I kind of own this place. Should I leave? She laughs, which is a heartwarming sound to hear. I'm not the only one to bask in the glow of her mood either. Stefan is putting a full cup of coffee onto a saucer, carefully pouring in milk and sugar. His obsession with detail and exact measurements remains the same, but part of his attention is obviously directed towards Annabelle. And who can blame him? She's a pretty girl, full of energy, and outgoing in a way that's his polar opposite. She's fun and convivial, and although they seem so very different from one another, I find myself musing about the two as a couple. The fantasy isn't perfect, however. It's marred by the shadow of Fred and Petunia's absence. Even Annabelle's laugh, as sunny as it sounds, feels weakened by the unspoken circumstances. Stefan walks out from behind the counter, coffee and croissant in his hand on the way to the table that ordered them. His eyes keep wandering back in my direction, either worried that his boss is judging his performance or to steal glances at Annabelle. I just thought you didn't work weekday afternoons is all. I take a seat, absent-mindedly surveying the status of the pastry display. It's tempting to reach around and get a brownie. Annabelle is nibbling on a brioche cheese croissant herself and nursing what looks like some green tea. Looking around, I notice a few more familiar faces from the lights. People I've seen in the cafe before, but that now stand out as being part of that particular crowd. Maybe they still see me as Ms. DuFour, owner of the Achewillow Cafe, but like it or not, we share a secret now. The same shared secret by every generation of Achewillow residents. I think I'm starting to get it, what the lights represent. I do, but sometimes I like to actually enjoy my coffee shop. If I didn't have to pay for these, she says, indicating her half-empty plate. "I'd weigh 1,000 pounds. I don't know how you show so much restraint." Luck, I want to say. I'm not exactly thin, not the way she is, but considering how much of my own cooking I eat, the amount of recipes I try, and the sheer buttery richness of my favorite dishes, it's fortunate that I stay in relative shape. I have an anxiety-driven metabolism. It's true, after a fashion. Whenever things get weird, or I get depressed, or any combination of fear and devastating life events, sleep is the first thing that gets sacrificed. Then there's the fretting and the hyperactivity. The more complex my existence becomes, the more calories I burn just by existing. It happened while I was having trouble in school. It happened when my relationship with Trevor fell apart. It happened a lot while dealing with the various demons of Achewillow. And it's happening again right now. It doesn't go unnoticed by Annabelle. "Still worried about Fred and Pete?" she asks. Her tone has none of the urgency and worry the situation deserves. Instead of wringing her hands about her friend's well-being, Annabelle seems more preoccupied with my state of mind. "Aren't you?" She shrugs. "Not really. They're smart. I'm sure they're fine, right?" I don't have an answer for her. Everyone's assured me that the Donsalites are harmless. But I only have to twist my head a few degrees to see the table where Petunia's parents pleaded with me to look into their daughter's disappearance. Fred assured me she'd come back, but within a few hours, he was gone too. I checked with his mother, and she hasn't seen him either. My only lead has become another potential victim of the lights. "You tell me," I answer. "You guys were the ones who seemed so sure everything was fine." Annabelle hesitates. She takes her teacup and sloshes the remaining liquid at the bottom around. It looks like she's trying to read the leaves that gather there, hoping for answers. "I'm sure it is," she says. "But what if it isn't? You'd figure it out, right?" This is the first time one of the people close to Fred and Pete is showing cracks of doubt. It's the first time one of the inner circle isn't just placating me with assurances. It's the type of moment where I feel most like Doris, like I have the opportunity to live up to her legacy. Doris was someone who helped people. She was there for Julia. She even showed compassion for a hunger demon, not content with simply placating it, but doing so in a way that eased the creature's suffering. It's sappy, but of everything she left behind for me, including the cafe and the recipe book and the apartment, it's often the opportunity to help that I find most precious. "I'm trying," I say, taking her hand in mine. "I'll be at the lights tonight, and I'll see what I can figure out. Maybe without Thomas in the way, I'll be able to find some clue as to what happened." I don't get the smile I expect, though, or even an easing of her features. In fact, the worry etched in Annabelle's face deepens. She looks outside, through the window and into the street. There's a fresh layer of white snow on the sidewalk, slowly being trampled by pedestrians. "That's the problem, though," she says. "The lights only appear every fall until the first snow." She turns back to face me, but I can already see where this is going, and my stomach sinks to the bottom of my shoes. There won't be a dance tonight. There won't be lights until next fall. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubeau and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.